What's going on, guys? The market is heating up big time, and I think we're set for a very exciting rest of the week. There was some very crazy news today that came out that is actually showing that the Federal Reserve is actually expecting a recession this year. So in today's video, we're going to cover exactly what's going on in that front. And we're also going to talk about the $521 billion tsunami that is getting very close. So there's a lot of things we have to talk about. Some pretty crazy news, and all while this is happening, we have stocks turning to the downside in a pretty major way. And of course, towards the end of the video, we have a big money $1 million trade that you won't want to miss. But with that being said, Tom, let's get right into it.
Yeah, Mike, the market was pretty rough today. Look at that heat map. It was very mixed, but I will say most of the movement was to the downside. So today was a very up and down day for anybody that was trading the markets. I'm sure that, a lot of you guys got faked out there. Let me know in the comments how you guys fared today. But early on, we had the CPI and the inflation data come out. So that actually came out and showed that inflation was dropping by a lot. And you can see that the SPY had a very nice reaction to that. But trading into market open and pretty much every time after that, we had continuous downtrend throughout the day. So going ahead, looking at the calendar, Mike, CPI, or I guess we would say the inflation rate year over year, came in at 5%. They were actually expecting 5.2 or 5.3%. So we actually came in a little bit lower, which is fantastic. That shows that inflation is falling down a little bit. But core inflation, which excludes food and energy, actually came in at 5.6% and actually popped up very, very slightly. But this wasn't even the biggest thing of the day. The biggest thing was obviously the Fed minutes and the Federal Reserve talking about a potential recession. But for right now, Mike, looking at the inflation rate, it's very nice to see it down here around 5%. That was actually a much larger of a drop than I was expecting. Like I said, they were kind of expecting 5.2 to 5.3. I kind of thought it would come in a little bit higher than that myself.
Yeah, it's a very bittersweet moment. It's like, yay, let's celebrate. Inflation is only 5% compared to 9.1% basically a year ago. But then at the same time, it's like, damn, inflation is still 5%. It's still way too high. And the scary part is like a lot of people are like, I know damn well inflation is not 5%. Some people are calling BS on that number. So it's like, it's reported at 5%. And it's like, yes, it's good that it's not 9, but still, like, we still have a serious problem. So that's very interesting. But the market sure liked it, at least to start off.
Yeah, it really did. Like, that was a lot of explosive movement that we saw early on. And if we go across the board to big stocks like Apple and Microsoft and other stocks like that, look in pre-market, they actually did very, very well. But as the day went on, we started to get obviously a little bit shaky as we got into the FOMC minutes, which was another big event that we talked about from yesterday, Mike. I will say, I'm starting to watch the CME FedWatch tool. They're still expecting a 25 basis point rate hike at the next meeting after all of the big events today. But the minutes actually showed that they're expecting us to possibly extend down into a recession, which is not good at all. There was an awesome quote right here. They said, given their assessment of the potential economic effects of the recent banking sector developments, the staff's projection at the time of the March meeting included a mild recession starting later this year with a recovery over the subsequent 2 years. That is a pretty big statement. They're looking at a mild recession later this year, and this was straight from the FOMC minutes. So sounds rough, Mike. I cannot wait to see what they talk about at that next meeting.
I mean, the Fed literally just said they're expecting a recession this year. Like, I feel like this, like, yes, it's on like the front page of CNBC and all that, but I feel like this is not being talked about as much as it maybe should be. The Federal Reserve is arguably like one of the most powerful institutions, in the United States, let alone the world, especially given how much of a influence they have on the economy and just the entire world economy, right? And it's like, you normally don't see this type of tone coming from the Federal Reserve, and it's very interesting, and it's unusual, and at the same time it's kind of alarming, so it's like very interesting, and it's like normally what you see with like the Federal Reserve is like they will lie to you to make things seem better than they actually are. So for example, like let's say let's say there's something really bad happening in the market, you'll see like a bunch of Fed officials be like, no, everything's fine, don't worry about it, the economy's it's all great, it's all sunshine and rainbows, when really they're panicking behind the scenes. But it's it's a lot more worrying when you straight up have the Fed saying, yeah, we are expecting a recession this year.
Yeah, and the vice chair for supervision actually said, well, the banking sector is sound and resilient after they said all that. Like you just said, the Feds are pretty much just puppets there trying to pretty much prop the markets up. And I'll actually give Powell, one of our buddies, a pretty big kudos over during COVID. 2020 and 2021, that recovery back up was huge. And, a lot of people said, well, they're not raising rates quick enough. Inflation's getting out of control. And they kept saying, well, it's transitory. It's transitory. That was the big thing, Mike, transitory back in the day. So I can't wait to see what happens at the next meeting. It's going to be crazy. They're going to probably talk about a whole bunch of stuff, but I know a lot of things that they've been talking about a lot lately has to do with the banking sector, like banks like Bank of America, JP Morgan, even the smaller banks like FRC. This one's been taking a pretty big tumble lately. And we actually had some pretty big news today with banks as well.
Exactly. So like everyone is looking at this bank stock situation, and like while it has gotten better, quote unquote better, over the past couple of weeks, there are still some very serious risks to just this whole industry. So essentially what we have is we're seeing a lot of money actually flow out of banks in general, as we've seen a lot of bank collapses and just failures over the past couple of weeks. People are scared, like they don't want their money just sitting in these banks, when we have banks going under like this, it's like, it makes sense. So essentially what we're seeing is people taking their money out of banks, and that ultimately squeezes these banks, because it's like they make money off deposits, and it's like deposits are a very necessary aspect of the whole system. So it's like when you see news where it's like, top US banks are revealing a $521 billion deposit drop, the most in a decade. Again, it's slightly eye-catching, especially considering we have bank stocks reporting earnings this Friday. So like that's another thing. So it's very, very interesting on that front. Looking at the calendar for this week, we have JP Morgan, we have Citigroup, we have Wells Fargo, PNC, and BlackRock all reporting earnings on Friday. So like, I'm very curious to see what these numbers look like.
Yeah, me too. It's going to be a huge end to the week there. And to see this much money flowing out of these banks is big. And, a lot of the big banks like JP Morgan and Bank of America and stuff like that, will probably be fine. They'll probably have enough people still holding their money within those big accounts, obviously big, corporations and stuff like that. But like it says in here, for smaller competitors like Western Alliance, they're having a lot of issues right now where, their customers are getting jittery and they're yanking the cash to store it in some of the bigger banks, actually. So I feel really bad for some of the smaller banks. Like, of course, some of the big ones like JP Morgan and others might hold up. Like, of course, they might lose some money. Maybe some big investors and stuff will start to park money into gold and other things like that, rather than parking it in those savings accounts or money market accounts or whatever they have. But I really feel like that some of those smaller banks, even like FRC, is, they could end up having some pretty bad issues over the coming couple months.
Yeah, and I do agree with you in the sense of like, these bigger banks should be all fine. They're too big to fail, Tom. There's no way the government's going to let them go under. But, some of these smaller banks definitely have some very serious problems on their hands. So we'll see what happens. I'm definitely pretty excited for these bank earnings on Friday. But Tom, looking at tomorrow for earnings, what else do we have on the schedule?
Yeah, so there's actually nothing too crazy, but we do have Delta and Progressive. So Delta will give us an insight into some of the airlines. And some people love to talk about the economy and airline earnings. So, if we see Delta report like a big drop in travel or something like that related to inflation or anything, that could be a pretty bad sign for the economy. But if they report good numbers, maybe that's a good sign for us heading into the, spring and summer months. But I don't know. It's going to be big for the airlines either way. And then Progressive is a huge insurance company, of course. But going over to Delta's chart, I will say they actually did pretty bad today. Early on, they were holding up around highs, but of course they fell off just like everything else did.
Exactly. And for those people who watched yesterday's video, they will know why this airline setup is so significant. We actually covered in yesterday's video on how hedge funds are actually betting against airline stocks right now, or more right now than they have since the COVID pandemic. So that's huge. There's around $2 billion worth of short positions on the JETS ETF, which is essentially a bunch of airline stocks all in one. So it's very interesting there. Keep a close eye on Delta tomorrow. Like Tom said, they do report earnings, and it's definitely an interesting setup. But with that being said, Tom, let's get right into some good setups for tomorrow. As the market turned over today, I'm looking at some of these tech stocks. The first one being Nvidia. This stock has been on a crazy run over the past couple months, and it is overbought. I can definitely see it coming down in the short term. I'm seeing right around 263 for a level for support. It has a lot of room to the downside, especially if the SPY and just the overall market is falling tomorrow.
Yeah, I will say this area of support here around 263 to 264 is huge right here. I've been waiting for Nvidia to drop below here for a long, long time. So I am with you, Mike. I think that there could be a pretty big sell-off here as well. And the overall market was pretty awesome to the downside today. Now, with my first play, it's actually going to be a play to the upside. Both of my plays are going to be up today, but they're both up in a weird way. So SQQQ, we've been talking about this a lot the past few days. It's an ETF that pops up whenever the NASDAQ and whenever most of the tech stocks in the market drop down. So I'm going to really watch SQQQ. It had a big run to the upside today, especially around the end of the day. If we can break that high of day around 31.80 or 32, this will be awesome. It'll mainly be a big momentum play, though. If you see the market dropping down, this could be a fantastic play to the upside.
Sounds good. With the next one that I'm looking at, we have Microsoft. So Microsoft is in a somewhat similar setup to Nvidia, but they are not as overbought as Nvidia. Microsoft also has support right around $281 and $280. If it breaks below that and the SPY tanks down too, I think this can make for a great setup to the downside. So either for like a short play or even just like buying puts.
Yeah, I really do too. I think it's also in a setup similar to Nvidia. Like it's kind of just testing that lower support there. So if we get under there, I agree that'll be an awesome play. And both of those stocks you mentioned, Nvidia and Microsoft, will probably be at the very top of my watch list tomorrow. I will say, like I said, I was looking at two stocks to the upside. My second one's actually GLD. Pretty surprising. I thought it was surprising to see it pop up end of day. It actually followed the SPY early on. It ran up and then tanked down with it. But end of day, whenever the SPY tanked off, we got those recession fears. Gold really popped up, and I think that that's going to be huge here. People, they don't want their money parked in banks, of course. So what can they do? They could possibly get bonds. They can do all types of things. But I think gold is going to be a pretty good option here. It's already been running up a lot. It's pretty overextended whenever you zoom out on the chart. It looks kind of like Nvidia, honestly, or something like that. But it goes up with high fear. And I think right now, fear is very, very high. I'm really watching the VIX on a daily chart standpoint right now. If this continues to bounce off the lower trend and we see VIX start to pop back up, I feel like fears will start to come in, and that'll be great for GLD. And like I said, I even like that SQQQ play as well.
All right, good stuff. Well, with that being said, let's get right into the momentum plays for tomorrow. And with the first one, we have Alibaba, or BABA, to the downside.
I'll say, Mike, I don't know what happened to the China stocks. They were doing pretty well a couple weeks ago, and now BABA is starting to give back all the gains from that big gap it had. So if we end up breaking under the low of day, right around 93.50, go ahead and watch for some puts.
There we go. With the next one, we have Amazon, also to the downside.
AMZN. Now, this one is honestly a little bit more expected in my eyes. We've been watching this one a lot. It's right around $100. It got under it today. So for tomorrow, if it gets under that big 97 support, go ahead and watch for some puts.
And with the last one, we have AMD, and we need both directions for this one.
Advanced Micro Devices, I will say this has been another nice one down, kind of like your NVIDIA play. Go ahead and make them break under 91.80. It's a pretty big support from early on this morning. If they end up popping up above 93, possibly look at calls, but I'll be honest, Mike, I don't see it getting back above that resistance tomorrow.
We will see. But you guys heard Tom. We have that upside level. If it breaks above that, check it out for a day trade up. Don't forget about that downside level too, though. If it breaks below that, there's definitely opportunity to the downside. And then, of course, don't forget about Amazon and BABA or Alibaba for potential plays to the downside. But it is now time for the big money trade of the day. We had about $1 million go into a short position on CZR, Caesars Entertainment. You guys know this company. It's a giant casino slash hotel company, you can say. And essentially, we have someone that is pretty bearish on it. So right now, CZR is trading for around $44 a share. And someone bought around $1 million worth of the CZR 44 strike put options that expire on June 16th of 2023. Essentially, you know, this is a bet against CZR. If the stock tanks down, the trader in the situation can make a lot of money. The only thing though is that, you know, it is a trade down, obviously, but you have to look at just the flows we're seeing in the market overall. So for example, the SPY has been on a very bullish run over like the past couple of months. Right now, we're coming up to some pretty strong resistance, and we're seeing some profit taking. At the same time, what I thought was very interesting is we're also seeing a lot of bearish flows in industries that are somewhat similar to like hospitality and hotels and casinos. You know, if you look at like airlines, you know, we're seeing, you know, very significant short levels with, you know, just airline stocks overall. And we've seen other bearish put flow with this industry over the past couple of weeks. So looking at CZR, I do not think the setup is bad for a trade down. I definitely do think there's opportunity, and I definitely think it's an interesting setup.
Yeah, I do as well. And I think that even that recession news today even adds in even more fear to it. You know, what does bad during recessions? Those entertainment things like this, like for example, Caesars and, MGM and the airlines, like you mentioned, and different areas like that in the market where people spend money like for leisure activities and stuff, usually see those decline pretty hard. Like look at Caesars during COVID. That was no joke. It got all the way down to $5 a share and then ran all the way up to 120. Like what was going on during that? If we do end up going into a recession later this year, like the Feds are thinking, I don't know, Mike, that could be big trouble for big stocks like CZR, MGM, and other stocks like that deal with hotels and hospitality, like you said.
Yeah, very, very interesting. All right. Well, Tom, for tomorrow, I think we're set for a very interesting day. We're actually seeing some decent selling pressure in the market, to the likes of which we haven't seen in a little bit. You know, we saw some pretty intense selling pressure today, and personally, I like it. I know, you know, some people will probably hate me for that, but, you know, for like short-term trading, sometimes playing some of these puts intraday offer more opportunity than the calls, especially when people are panicking and, you know, selling off a bunch of stocks. So I'm pretty excited. I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity for short-term traders over the next couple of days. Do you have any final thoughts or anything else you want to cover?
Yeah, I agree. It's going to be fun. You know, we're getting a lot of intraday opportunities here, and it's going to be a very nice time, especially if some of these stocks continue, like NVIDIA below that big support that we mentioned earlier. Go back and check it out if you guys missed it. And don't forget about the big banks later in the week, too. That'll be huge on Friday. Might even be bigger than the CPI event today, although I don't know if anything could be much bigger than that. But definitely watch those banks. That's going to be crazy there towards the end.
There we go. And if you guys are into short-term trading, definitely check out the first link in the description and the comments down below. Basically, if you're into short-term trading, we have the best program out there. Our bots did pretty dang good today. We can look at some of the example plays, and we'll start out with the Baba one. Basically, we had our sniper bot call out the Baba 97 strike puts. They were alerted at $290 each. They popped all the way up to $385 each, but it gets even better. If we scroll up a little bit and look at the coin setup, it was coin put options alerted at $362 each. They popped all the way up to $525 each. And then we can't forget about the AMD setup, alerted at 213, popped all the way up to 280. And then there's another one. If we go into the free day trading channel, we had FUTU puts alerted at 171. And they popped up to 249. Of course, not every single play wins. No software, no strategy has a 100% win rate, but our bots do an amazing job, and they just get smarter and smarter and smarter and smarter and smarter over time. And we have some awesome new updates coming very soon. Our staff team works harder than anyone else in the industry. And we really do have some awesome new updates coming soon. So if you want to try it out, if you want to join the program, check out that first link in the description and the comments down below. We have a bunch of great software that you won't find anywhere else. And in the worst case scenario, you can cancel at any time. But with that being said, thank you guys so much for watching. And last but not least, huge shout out to today's member of the day, Houdini, in the StockedUp Discord. You've been in the chat for over 2 years now, and your activity has been pretty solid lately. So definitely make sure to keep it up. And besides that, let's have an amazing end to the week.